Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the 4th box. As you know, if you've been with us the last couple weeks, we've been doing a lot of current event coverage, so we're probably just going to keep rolling with that tonight. There's always so much to discuss, and some nights we come into it. I know this is a night like this for me where I feel like I don't really even have a lot that I specifically want to talk about, but because there is always such a tidal wave of crazy headlines, I am quite certain we will not struggle to have another great conversation tonight. So, Pops, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, hello everybody. Welcome back to the 4th Box podcast, coming to you from our virtual Buckman Tavern. And as a special treat tonight, I have a picture here that is of the actual Buckman Tavern along the Lexington Green. That picture was taken sometime around 1900. And as we've mentioned many times, the Buckman Tavern was the meeting place of those great patriots that on April 19th, 1775, were engaged in a skirmish that was really the beginning of the American Revolution. So we like to call to mind that great place. And tonight I wanted to show everybody a quick picture of that. Of course, it's been all redone and it's a historical landmark now, and it is worth a visit if anybody happens to be up in that area. So tonight, as a toast, and I'm on the wagon this week, so I'm only drinking flavored water. But as a toast tonight, for whatever was involved with bringing about the peace, however long it lasts, and the release of hostages and the apparent ceasefire and peace agreement that has been met, I think an awful lot of credit has to go to Trump, who, many naysayers as to whether or not this was a possibility. And for whatever reason, at least at this point, there does appear to be peace in the region. There appears to be some exchanges of prisoners and this sort of thing, which is a blessing we can all be thankful for. So I'm going to toast the State Department, President Trump, and all those that were involved with getting this peace agreement underway. It's a very big deal. All of us should be ready to celebrate that. I think it's a long time coming.
Yeah, for sure. Cheers to peace, no matter how long it lasts. Even, like you said, a little is welcome.
Exactly. And then for my quote tonight, how can great minds be produced in a country where the test of great minds is agreeing in the opinion of small minds? And this is from a long time ago, and it was John Stuart Mill, who we've used before for some quotes. And I only want to go on to say that when we as a country have allowed persons in positions of influence to promote more than 2 sexes, mutilation of children's genitals, unchecked and unvetted immigration, destruction of our city by paid thugs called BLM and Antifa, and celebration of the assassination of a political rival or ideological adversary, we have slipped into governance by small minds. And I think this quote shines a real light on that. How can we hope to produce great minds when we're listening to small minds, or certainly at least some part of this country is, and finding them the people that they should be following? So as we get ready to move forward into some current events, I want to call attention to Uh, Up in Alaska, I don't know if any or many people have heard, but there was a significant storm that was the remnants of the cyclone, typhoon, whatever they call them over in on the East Rim that has struck the coast of Alaska about 400 miles southeast of Anchorage. And I don't know that I can pronounce the name right, but Kewillinkenok or something like that, and Kipnuk. And there are many people missing. Coastal villages have been inundated with a significant storm surge. People missing. Some people have already been found to be deceased. So our thoughts and our prayers, and anybody who is interested, I am sure Samaritan's Purse, American Red Cross, and all the other uh, agencies that typically respond will be making their way into that area. I know there's helicopters. The Alaska National Guard is already in there. So just want to call to mind for people listening around the country, we do have another natural disaster that has taken place, and it's in Alaska of all places. So I wanted to get the evening started with that.
Yeah,
Also,
I'm glad you did.
yeah, I want to mention just one of the topics to get started on. I don't know how many people have seen or heard. There was a teacher out in uh, Scottsdale, Arizona, third grade teacher who evidently had identified, according to her, one of her third grade students as an extremist. Obviously, this was related to this child or this child's parents having opposite political views. So this child was tormented by this school teacher, who, by the way, happened to have posted up celebratory remarks after the Charlie Kirk uh, assassination. So I only wanted to talk about this briefly, as these are the kind of people, or at least this is an example of some of the kind of people that our young people and children are being exposed to. And if we want to try to get our hands around how far off the rail we've gotten in terms of what many people are thinking of today, this is the sort of thing that can be encountered in our public schoolhouses. There should be absolutely no room for this. Oh, by the way, this person also uh, had a neighbor spying on this child as well. So
Oh, wow.
this is really over the top, and I think we as a country are much better than that, and we have to root this kind of thing out. We have to make the schoolhouse a place where all opinions are welcome. This is the place where children are supposed to be taught how to think, not what to think. And this is certainly an example of at least one bad apple out in the Scottsdale. And I hope this person is terminated.
Yeah, I suspect they will be. I'm sure now that it's publicly shared information, there is a lot of public backlash. But the problem is that there are so many people like this within the school system that the backlash is always reactive. You know, it's hard to catch these things proactively. We don't we don't root the problem out until the problem becomes so great and the damage is already done. So that's why, you've seen such a shift to homeschooling, and that's why there are more and more prominent people that are talking about homeschooling, and the numbers are continuing to increase because there are so many people who just do not want to subject their children to this force feeding of an ideology. And that's what it is. I mean, there's so much propaganda in our everyday life, and when you are this age, third grade, I think you said, these are the people that you're spending so much of your time with. Most people, both of your parents are at work all day. You're not spending time with your siblings. They're maybe in other grades. So you are in a room with this teacher, or maybe several teachers, depending on. And if they are force feeding you this type of rhetoric all day, that's the person that you're going to turn into. And it doesn't matter how you're brought up, by your parents and your family, and maybe even your church and things outside of school, because the majority of your time is spent in a propaganda bubble. So it's no surprise that so many of these people, are raised up to thinking in a way like this, like cheerful and excited about somebody being murdered in front of their eyes. And you think that stuff's not real. You think it's got to be all bots. Oh, all this really, really nasty, hateful stuff. It's got to be some type of like AI manipulation of the algorithms of the internet to try and make it feel like there's this cultural divide building up again. And then, just the other day, I'm on Facebook scrolling, checking up on kind of local current events, right? And over in New Hampshire, there was a Charlie Kirk sort of memorial, like parade, I guess. Everybody met up and they had their flags and their banners. They drove around town, whatever. Not by me, but just more southern in the state. And the comments that were on the pictures of this event, I mean, the most innocent thing in the world, right? Like there's nothing going on here that could be remotely seen as offensive to another group of people. The way that people were responding, and these are regular people, I start clicking into their profiles and I'm just like, wow, this is just a regular person. Such nasty and hateful things still about somebody who was murdered, a 30-some-year-old kid murdered in front of all of us. And there is still so much hate about it and so much excitement that he was killed and so much of the whole he deserved it type of conversations. And I just, those are the people that I go, okay, those are not people that are waking up. This is a big number. These are not people that are, it's not the majority, but it's still a pretty big number. You're not waking those people up. There's nothing that you or I say or anybody on any source says that wakes these people up because your mind is so broken. If that's the type of response that you have to, a couple 60-year-old ladies sharing pictures of them being at this event and you're being so nasty to them. Like, what are we doing? How have you been so manipulated to hate your neighbor so much? It's just, and that's exactly what you're breeding in a school situation like that.
Yeah, not only that, and I want to come back to that comment, but I want to circle back around. In addition to the fact that you're taking away an objective place for different ideas to be shared, which is what all schools are supposed to be. All thoughts and all ideas are welcome, which you've certainly snuffed that out. But I think even more importantly, the school should be a safe haven, especially for young children. A school, the parents are entrusting that school and the teachers therein to provide a level of security and comfort and safety, a place where a child can turn if they feel threatened. And this is the exact opposite that's being displayed, at least in this case, by a teacher who has been entrusted with the care and trust of children, and to have an adult tormenting a third grader. And to go back to the remarks you made relative to people making nasty remarks and hateful statements towards somebody who is having a Memorial Day or a memorial celebration of Charlie Kirk's life, and to have this kind of filth and garbage and nastiness come out. How have we allowed a segment of society, whatever portion these people make up, and hopefully it's quite small, they just happen to have a loud mouth. How did these people become so radicalized that they can go against all of foundational principles that civilization has used forever and ever? Amen. You're going back to being in direct violation of the basic 10 commandments here. You're celebrating the death of another and you're tormenting people and all this. This is completely against what the majority, I don't care what your political leanings might be, the majority of people accept as good behavior. This goes completely against it. And to have people that are tormenting children, or to have people that are harassing others that are having a moment to honor Charlie Kirk or anybody else, to have them being harassed and nasty things. It's just, I don't know how this country got to this point other than propaganda, which was something that you mentioned a few moments before.
I think it's partially that, it's partially the propaganda issue, but it's partially that we have gone out of our way to take the weakest members of our society and put them on a pedestal. And so now you have these people who have historically been the weakest members of their families, their communities, maybe, maybe their school, whatever it might be. Historically, they have been the bottom of the barrel in their careers, on and on and on. And we have now, as a society, made them believe that they are better than the rest of us. And we've created this idea of entitlement and victim mentality. And so there's all these people who maybe once were the victim. And because we went through this whole era of, the whole participation trophy thing and everybody's equal. No, they're not. And that's okay. It's actually fine. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to have different skills. Some people are weaker physically and mentally. And when you take those people and you put them at the precipice of what your society is supposed to represent, your society falls down. The whole thing crumbles because you can't have those people in positions of decision making and think that it's all just gonna buff out. You have all these people who were given this entitled mindset, this I can say whatever I want, I can do whatever I want, nobody can stop me, and I'm not wrong. And so you have all these people thinking that, and this is the result of that. And then you couple it with the propaganda, and it becomes violent and it becomes hateful. It's the perfect storm, honestly. And it was cultivated, it's no accident and it's no coincidence. And all of these things are coinciding into this perfect storm where then, every couple years, the media and the government come out and fuel this culture war, whether it's race or religion or, simple political divide. And it brings it all to a head again. And it just seems like every time that happens, every time it comes to a head, it's closer and closer to a point that we can't return from. And that's where we're at now.
Yeah, I think as you describe that, it ties in really well with the quote that we had at the beginning of the night, where we have allowed, and I'm going to be quite frank about this, if we have allowed our leaders to be the people that are espousing such nonsense as men can have babies and there's more than two sexes, we have allowed the weakest, both of mind and otherwise, to get to the point where they are sitting in leadership positions. And this is what is spawned from it. And to go back to another point you made, I think every time that there's this cultural conflict that's stirred up by those in leadership and big media, whether it's related to BLM activities or the No Kings March or J6 or whatever, each time it seems like both sides have become more entrenched, more committed to their side, and more willing to bring this thing to a head. So I think it does appear like we're marching in that direction, but there has certainly been a radicalization of a certain segment of society, and that's where these hotspots flare up and these very near instances of something boiling over. You might have heard today that Pritzker, who is the governor out in Illinois, who appears to be anxious and willing to lock horns with one of the few federal authorities that is at the Washington, D.C. level, and that is maintaining a sound border and taking people that aren't supposed to have been here and got through accepted means out. And he is now suggesting that the state of Illinois is going to arrest the ICE agents when they're carrying out their duties. So this to me is theater, but it is intended to cause, as you just mentioned, another log on the fire of the cultural unrest and civil unrest that seems to be going on between the political divide. I just want to remind everybody, as we have spoken from the very beginning, we adhere and very much expect our elected officials to adhere. And the federal government has very, very few authorities. Their authorities really are to protect for us our rights. And then they have the currency and maintaining a military and the border. And the border is one of them. So if people get across the border by one way or another, they're responsible for maintaining that system of naturalization. So these states can all jump up and stand and shout for states' rights now and all of those things. That appears to be where Pritzker's coming in. But this is a delegated authority, and they are responsible for maintaining that. So I don't know where all that's going to go. I thought it was an interesting note. I saw it late in the day today that Pritzker was spouting off about going to arrest the ICE agents that are mostly focused in Chicago. You will note this is a city, I think there have been 1,500 people shot in the city of Chicago this year. That doesn't mean they've all died. I don't know what the number is of people that have been shot and died, but there are 1,500 people in the city of Chicago that have been shot this year. This would, in any other place in the world, it would be considered a war zone, and there would have been action taken, such as deployment of military to get this thing under control. So I'm not a big one for having our military patrolling our streets, but if this is something that is unable to be managed by local and state officials, and it is directly tied to people that have got into this country by illegal means, therefore making them illegal, it is the federal government's duty and responsibility to take care of it.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. We've talked about this many, many times recently because this is such a hot issue right now. The whole, JB Pritzker thing, I had seen, he tweeted something, and there was more to the tweet than this, but he ended it with here in Illinois, we abide by the Constitution, implying that the federal government isn't by sending federal forces into the city to resolve the illegal immigrant issue. And it's like, buddy, as the governor, it's pretty embarrassing to say that we abide by the Constitution when you don't understand that the Constitution specifically dictates the federal government being the one that comes in and solves this problem. That's what it says. Article 4, Section 4. The federal government's going to take care of it. They have to take care of it, in fact. And for this guy to be riling up the people of Chicago, the people of Illinois, to be like, we need to take a stand against this unconstitutional activity, it's completely bonkers and it's unfair because so many people will go, well, he's the governor, so he probably knows the Constitution.
Yeah.
And because most people aren't going to take the time to look into themselves, they're going to trust the person that they elected, their governor. They're going to trust that he is correct. And when he says that this is an unconstitutional act, they're going to believe it. And you can see why. You would think this would be the guy who would probably know what was in there and what wasn't. So it's pretty unfair for the people of Illinois. And to your point, it does further inspire actual physical, kinetic issues, physical altercations going forward, because we already have those on the streets of Chicago. Well, then when you say, oh, ICE is going to come in and we're going to kick them out, we're going to have a war right here in our city, you're inviting everybody else to be a part of that. And how is that a solution?
Yep. It almost seems like they're stirring it up with intent to have something flare up and have it flare up in a metropolitan area where a lot of people can quickly become engaged. It just seems like there are people in leadership positions that are pushing all the wrong buttons, which means it's being done with intent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I was going to kind of go into next with this whole thing. There's a lot of people that have been butting heads with the Trump administration over the illegal immigrant conversation. Obviously, Pritzker is one of them. We know Gavin Newsom has been big on this. He's talking about it again today. Obama's running his mouth on this right now. And kind of want to roll right into this next conversation. But again, I'm going to say these are people that regular people in the citizenry trust. So when they say these things, when they say these are unconstitutional, when they say it's, authoritarian and decimating our democracy, which again, we already know, well, we're not that. So you're already lying. And you just proved it without me having to. But when they say things like this, the public believes these are people they can trust. And so they go, well, yeah, that must be right. And so then that's part of where this propaganda comes in. That's where these ideas formulate. And they think this is solid footing. This is the opinion that I'm going to have. And it's because a former president told me it so it must be right. And you have Obama on a podcast even today talking about this, talking about, this authoritarianism that we're dealing with when it comes to the immigrant stuff, talking about how he thinks it's a real problem that this administration is coming after their political opponents with the use of the DOJ and the FBI. As if this is the first time we're seeing that. I mean, that was the name of the game when Obama and Biden were in office. Trump's first term, we didn't really see it. I think we're seeing a little bit now, and we're kind of seeing it with Obama, which is probably why he's talking about it. Because you have all of this information now today coming out saying, yeah, hey, that whole thing with Obama making up the whole Russia hoax, the Russiagate thing, that was all real. And we have evidence of it. He declassified the whole file, and we're declassifying it. And yeah, that actually happened. It wasn't a conspiracy. It's like, well, we know it wasn't a conspiracy to a lot of us at the time. And now it's just not a conspiracy to the rest of you. But you're still going to have people saying that can't be real because Obama himself, as this is coming to light, as this is publicly being spoken about, is sitting on a podcast saying Trump's administration is the problem for coming after their political opponents. Yeah. Even though he's coming after you for an actual crime.
Yeah. To me, it illuminates the lack of a truthful and objective media. That if the media had done its job on both sides during the Obama years, during Trump years, during Biden years, and been open and objective and honest and truthful with their description of events, the people wouldn't have been so adversely affected. But since I think this is to me where the term useful idiots come from, when you have a large segment of society that's willing to say, okay, when Trump was being charged with 60-some felonies and, all of these sort of things, the whole Russia investigation, the whole time he was in office and all these things, which was a political witch hunt, but that was being expressed through the media, selling to the people, and the masses buy into this stuff. The useful idiots buy into this stuff. So now the political winds are in favor. And now quite the opposite when Trump's in office and they are going after crimes that were committed, but no matter which side of the aisle it came from, we're going to go after crimes that were committed. Now the media completely flip-flops and says what he is doing is a political witch hunt. And I think this just illuminates further how important it is to get away from traditional outlets, listen to these opinion pieces, listen to alternative media news outlets, and get a wide selection of opinions so that you can formulate a better opinion. Because I think people have largely bought into the mainstream legacy bought and paid for media that's owned by the same people that own our Congress and the House and the Senate and the courts and everything else. It's the same corporations that own them. So they sell and get the political winds all revved up behind their agenda. And I think that's very, very evident by the difference in tone related to during Obama years, Biden years, and during the Trump years.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, obviously the media is part of this propaganda machine that we were speaking of earlier, and that's why situations like this are just used as another tool to further the division between us rather than actually expressing or exposing any truth to us. It has nothing to do with providing truth for the people. That is long since past. We do not have a press that operates that way. They are out there, of course. To your point, there are plenty of alternative sources, but the ones with the big names, the ones with the notoriety, they haven't reported truth in years, and I don't care I don't care if it's CNN or Fox News.
That's correct.
They're all liars.
Yeah. They're not being objective with the information they're relaying, and they're putting it out there to nudge the needle one way or the other. That's what they're doing instead of presenting the facts. And along the lines of the media, I was wondering if you happen to see. I don't have the complete details on this story, but apparently Hegseth has required any news-related agencies that are perusing the halls of the Pentagon, and I'm sure they're outer ring folks. I'm pretty sure that doesn't include all the way into the inner rings and however that works. But he's requiring these people to be escorted, and there's belly aching going on from both sides or both political leanings in terms of news, and some of those are alternative news outlets as well. But I think it's only prudent for us, if this is where military planning takes place, if this is where all of the preparations for anything that we may need to be considering in defense of this country take place, I think it would only be prudent. And to think that people that obviously have an axe to grind or have a political bias are just roaming around in the halls of the Pentagon digging up information and putting their spin on a story, I think it's a very prudent move. I don't care, again, who did it. I don't think it should have ever got started where people who have proven to be not trustworthy are roaming around in the halls of the Pentagon. I don't know if you caught wind of that story or not.
I did. And there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of people kind of upset about it, freedom of the press, this and that. And that might be a solid argument to stand on if this were just unbiased reporting, which it's not, as we've just discussed. These are corporations, the same as any other, bought and paid for by other bigger corporations with an agenda to push. So they're not letting, private organizations who have that same agenda to push, be it big food, big pharma, whatever it might be, they're not letting people from those organizations just roll the halls of the Pentagon and dig up whatever information they want to then use to their advantage to manipulate the minds of maybe their customers or clients, So why would the press be any different? I guess is how I feel about it, because they are factions of these organizations.
Yeah.
So it's the same.
And in this country, the military is always subject to the civilian authority. I get all that. President Trump is the commander-in-chief of the military. Then you have Hegseth, and you have the various division and branch commanders and all those things. They can make public the information that they deem is appropriate, that does not have to do with strategic interest or that sort of thing. I think we, as a country, like any other country, has a right to protect what we need to be doing. And if there are we engage in conflict without there being a declaration of war by the halls. Why aren't the people raising hell about that? Why do they have to be inside the halls of Pentagon roaming around trying to dig up some story? But they never made an issue about the one thing that they really should have. That is that we've been engaged in all kind of conflict, and maybe soon in another one by the way things are looking, either Ukraine or the Middle East or Taiwan or who knows where. Why aren't they presenting to the people the fact that we're not supposed to engage in any conflict unless there is a declaration of Congress? That's the kind of thing I think that they should be presenting to the people, not whether or not they can get in there and dig up some dirt on some Pentagon official or something like that. I think, of course, the military answers to civilian authority in this country. That's always the way it has been. But the civilian authority that sits at the top is the president.
Yeah.
And he makes himself more than available to the press. And if they have questions related to military actions and activities, they should be able to address it at the civilian authority that is over the top of the military without being directly in those places where things may be needing to be kept secret for some time. Well, obviously, if we're getting ready to go somewhere, there's supposed to be a declaration of war anyway, where the voice of the people has an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not we should be engaged with such conflict. By the way, we haven't done that since World War II, and the public seems to be completely at peace with that, like they are every other time the federal government breaches its constitutional authority. That's what we really ought to be stirring up through our media and presenting to the people is if you know the way this is supposed to work, this crap wouldn't be going on in the first place.
And that's just it. Does that not speak to exactly what I was just saying, that these are just organizations owned by other organizations, i.e. the military-industrial complex. So we wouldn't want that type of news to get out prematurely and have the American people upset about it, because then the whole thing gets nixed. So I think I completely agree with you. I think you make a great point there. I do want to jump into some other conversations. I'm going to slide into one that's pretty similar to this. We're talking about Pete Hegseth, so let's roll right into the conversation about the Qatari Air Force Base in Mountain Home, Idaho. I'm hearing kind of a lot of different things about this. You know, originally it seemed like the sentiments were pretty cut and dry. We're allowing Qatar to establish a military base in Idaho. And then it started to kind of seem, after a lot of backlash, that there was, I don't want to call it backpedaling, but it seemed like people were correcting, saying that was a misinterpretation. You know, we always work with other countries and train with them. We train their guys, they train our guys. It happens all the time. You know, we're allowing a portion of Qatar's Air Force to come and train with our Air Force, using our base, using our planes, etc. That's what they're going to be doing. They're not starting their own military base. They're going to be utilizing some of our equipment and training with us on certain things. So not 100% sure which one is true, which one is real. You know, it's always hard to discern with things like this, especially when it's the government telling you what's what. I don't know. What I will say that is mildly frustrating, I mean, one, if it's that there actually just is a military base being installed for another country, that's a hard and immediate no from me. And so that was, when I initially heard that, my gut instinct was that I was pretty angry, pretty confused, wanted to know how that would even come to be, and, you know, certain that the American people weren't going to be okay with that. When I hear it as the second option, sort of a training operation between two forces, that's fine. You know, we're doing that all the time. We literally are doing that in countries around the world all the time. So that's fine. But the thing that is interesting about this, I'm going to go back to the Israel conversation here. We've been talking about it a lot. It's still important, and it's important with this conversation in particular because there are a lot of people raising hell about this Qatar thing, and nobody seems to be upset about our involvement and their involvement with us when it comes to Israel. We have these really weird unspoken relationships with another country from the Middle East, but we're not touching that subject. Now we have this conversation going on with Qatar, and all of a sudden everybody's like, nope, gotta squash that right now. Can't even talk about what is going on, whether it's this, whether it's that. We can't be doing that. I just think it's a weird kind of double-edged sword here.
Yeah. A bunch of great points that need to be talked about. First of all, we have familiarity with Mountain Home, Idaho, and people that were on the Air Force Base out there, oddly enough. Secondarily, my point would be Secretary Hegseth does not have the authority to make that decision, in my estimation. Again, this is something that needs to go through Congress, i.e. the voice of the people. The House is supposed to originate every bill that requires spending. I cannot imagine that there is going to be the potential of some other country setting up a base in this country without there being an exchange of funds. Are they going to just provide to this potential suitor land that is already federally possessed? I'm not going to tell you they own it, because they don't, according to the Constitution. But if it is already designated as a military base that was allowed to the federal government by the state of Idaho, then it does belong to the federal government. Remember, that's the only way the federal government is supposed to possess any land outside of Washington, D.C., if it was granted to the federal government by the state in question. So I would say that whatever action may or may not be taking place, this should go through Congress. That means the voice of the people has an opportunity to weigh in. Not that it would be done objectively to benefit the American people. It would be done to benefit those in government, of course. We have to understand that's what's happened since we've fallen into the trap we're in. But then to follow up with your point about Israel, of course we know why there is no political pressure about Israel, because the Israelis own the media, or a big chunk of the media, or certainly have some influence on the media, and are able to steer the useful idiots into making sure that there is no pressure applied to Israel, even though we have these sort of activities going on. And we have military bases all over the world, but largely those are military bases in places around the world that have requested us to provide some level of security. I don't agree with all of that either. I don't think that we should have 150, 200, however many hundreds of bases there are all over the world, putting our young men and women lives at risk at the benefit of somebody else. And then the last point on that thing, the only thing, if this is something that is underway, and somehow, some way, despite all the arguments that we've made here, such as the Congress has to be involved, it has to be federal land, they cannot take from the state of Idaho land.
Right, yeah.
Unless Idaho grants it. So we've talked about all that. But the only other thing that I can see being a potential, does the U.S. want to expand its presence in Qatar? Or do they? I'm sure we got people over there already. Do they want a base? So they say, "Oh yeah, you can put a base, but we want a base up someplace where we can train our people." Is this the sort of behind the scene things that are going on? A lot to come out here yet, but to your initial reaction, I'm completely opposed. I don't think that we need them here. We certainly don't need them here for our defense. So I don't think you should be selling out the state of Idaho. If the state of Idaho wants to grant the military additional acreage for a military base and they want to turn it over to another country, that should go through Congress as far as I'm concerned. Pete Hegseth nor nobody else is a king and has the authority to make that call.
Yeah, I think those are awesome points and a great way of looking at these things. It kind of cues me up to roll right into the next conversation, which I had almost started with because of your toast, actually. I do want to talk a little bit about the current ceasefire in Israel and Gaza, of course, just because it's still pretty fresh information at this point. I guess I am a pessimist when it comes to a lot of this stuff, you know what I mean? And when I think about this whole potential military base of another country in our country, and then I think about what's going on in Israel and Gaza, I immediately jump down the mind rabbit hole of worst case scenario. So right now, my question is, how likely is it that this war is really over? Because at the end of the day, Israel's going to do what they want to do. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. I mean, yeah, it does seem like he played a big role here, but Israel controls us. So it's unlikely to think that, as far as the Israeli side, our country had much to do with this ultimate decision. Maybe on, the side of Hamas, we played an important role. I'm not sure. I can't speak to that, right? How would I ever even know that? But I do worry, what comes next, specifically when it comes to the fact that our country is sending approximately 200 of our soldiers over to help facilitate this end of war. And I just wonder what that looks like long term, because we don't really know that it's the end. And yet we're going to send our guys into this situation that we've avoided. We haven't sent them there. But now we're going to do it, and we're going to do it in the name of facilitating a peaceful end to the conflict. On paper, that sounds fine. But if this thing kicks off again, and our guys are there, and a couple of our guys get caught up in the conflict, and some of them die, what happens? Kind of seems like we get sucked in pretty easy. Another country that is sending troops as part of this conflict resolution is Qatar. I just think that's really weird and interesting. There's not a ton of other countries. I think there's like 4 or 5. Qatar is one of them. So while this is going on, we have this discussion for them to have a military base here. And I kind of can see this long-term thing in my mind where if something kicks back off and our guys are there and our guys get sucked in, and then it's one of those things where it kind of riles up the American people enough to go, yeah, let's get involved after we've avoided it for this long. Okay, cool. So we go to get involved. Now we have Qataris there and we have Qataris here. And so it kind of turns into a much bigger war, potentially, in the Middle East, now involving many other countries, with alliances that have already been established but have now been strengthened by these partnerships and deals that have just happened. I just think it's weird timing. I think it just gives me a general sense of uneasiness. I don't know what's going to come of it. I just can see how it could kind of take a turn for the worse here.
The big point I take away from that is, as you pointed out, there is obvious effort to strengthen ties with Qatar. This is pretty obvious if they're going to be engaged in part of the peacekeeping mission, and we're also offering or apparently offering them training or a facility here in this country. There appears to be some willingness on both sides to strengthen that relationship, which I think was pretty good anyway. But for what purpose? Who knows what's coming that they would want to be building and making sure that that relationship is even on stronger ground. Along that same line with the whole Israel thing, one of the people that I've read for years, and I find him to be very insightful, along with Victor Davis Hanson and Alex Newman and others, is Paul Craig Robertson. He had a piece out earlier in the week, and I'm just going to read a couple of sentences that come toward the end of this piece that he had published a couple of days ago. And it says, today the world faces an even more absurd situation. Israel, a tiny country with no resources except American money and protection, has Western foreign policy and apparently also Russia's in its tiny hands. For a quarter century, Americans have fought to destroy Arab nations for the sake of expanding greater Israel. American soldiers were told by their lying government that they were dying and being permanently disabled to protect America from a non-existent Muslim terrorism, when in fact they were dying for greater Israel. Now we are on a road to our destruction in pursuit of the Zionist American neoconservative agenda of hegemonic America and Israel. Where is the leadership to stop it? And that came from Paul Craig Roberts. None of those words were mine. I read those right out of his article that he had published a couple of days ago. And I find it to be very thought-provoking and along the same lines that I think, as we've discussed many times, we know that the Israeli government has influence largely over our Congress, over our courts, over our media, within our military-industrial complex. And as Paul Craig Roberts is suggesting here, much of the conflicts that we have been involved with were really Israel behind it over there in the Middle East. So I think, again, as you mentioned, we're very happy that there is peace. Their prisoners have been exchanged, people that were being tortured and held in terrible conditions and all these other things appears to have been resolved. Whether or not this is a long-term ceasefire and peace agreement, we'll have to wait and see. But I am also concerned about American boots on the ground over there and being sucked into a greater participation if something breaks loose again.
Yeah, totally. It just feels like a sneaky way to slide us into something that we would have otherwise opposed. If we had a chance to oppose it. It's very, very similar, going back to the educational thing at the beginning of this conversation, the topic of the problem in schools. It seems that so often our response to these problems is reactive instead of proactive. And that's very much a problem with what we already know, because we, the people, are not engaged and informed. And if we were, we would have the opportunity to have a proactive response, to react negatively to these things when they come up. We don't get that opportunity.
I think it's just a reflection of how ill-informed and how propagandized most of this country is. We just go lockstepping along with whatever the agenda tells us we're supposed to believe, whatever we're supposed to cheer for, we stand and cheer, and whatever we're supposed to ridicule and look down on, we do the same. And I think this is something that we've talked about many times before. I think it's reflective of one of the points that we've made before in several of these things, is that government is not here doing its job, which is to secure our individual rights. All of those things that were guaranteed by the Constitution and Bill of Rights, that's government's only job, is to make sure we all have that. And they have instead become the biggest threat to those very things. And that's with the help of big media, at the behest of the military-industrial complex, big farm and big food, and all of these sort of things. We have encourage people since the beginning of this podcast to break away from what has been spoon-fed into you. Take a broader view of the world around you, not just what you get off of your favorite news outlet. Try and get a bigger slice of opinion and a bigger vantage point, a wider view of the situations that are going on around us to help you make informed decisions. I wanted to talk about, I don't know if you happen to see, Mike Lindell, who was one of the people that was out in Vegas when we were out there back a year and a half ago. He has been found guilty by a Minnesota judge of defaming Dominion voting systems. Yet there was no trial, nor was there any jury, but he was found guilty. This is not a judge's job. Remember, as we talked about on one of the instances before, one of the sessions before, when we talked about your rights and responsibilities as a juror, you as a juror are the decision maker. The judge is supposed to be the referee between the defense and the prosecution, not the ultimate decision maker. Somehow, and if anybody had an opportunity to listen to Stuart Rhodes, like we recommended last week on the show, if you happen to listen to Stuart Rhodes, he said plea deals are coercion. It happens all the time. The whole system is built on that. They charge you with a big pile, knowing that they'll get you to agree to something, just like many of the J6 people did. They just heap a pile of charges on you. As a police officer, a former police officer, I remember being told, this was 40 years ago, being told by district attorneys, you heap all this stuff on and we'll beat it down to something that we get them to just go along with, to get out from under the threat of all these other charges. This is what has become of our justice system. It's a joke. It's a legal system. Who can afford the biggest, highest priced lawyer? They make a mockery of the Constitution. There are no rights protected. Here, Mike Lindell is found guilty. They find Mike Lindell guilty of defaming Dominion voting system that everybody with eyes that see and ears that hear knows there was faulty election data presented by this. But if he somehow is being charged and found guilty of defaming them, yet there was no trial and there was no jury. We have slipped to the point where our system at all levels, in all branches, is broken. It's shot. It does not work. It's nothing close to at what was intended. And only we can fix it. The people that are in there are obviously not going to fix it. Maybe there have been a few of them that have gone in with the intention of trying to do something. They either were flushed out the next time around or they were morphed into one of the turds in the cesspool. That's the only two options, because you do not hear anybody. Tom Massey from time to time, Rand Paul from time to time, but not on every single issue are these people demanding constitutional adherence. And every single one of them should be, and none of these conditions would exist if they were.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I want to make a quick correction to what you said, because I was really curious when you said that about Mike Lindell and the whole Dominion thing, because I just had seen within the last couple days that Dominion got bought out by, I think it's called Liberty Vote, which is, I don't know, it's some ex-Republican something, whatever.
I see.
I don't know all the details, but obviously they're trying to rebrand because Dominion came under so much fire. Tons of lawsuits heaped on them, etc. And I thought, wow, that's crazy that it was so bad that somebody had to buy them out and rebrand, and yet Mike Lindell is now being found guilty of defamation when it was clearly true and accurate. So I did a quick search. It looks like what he was allegedly defaming was Smartmatic. So,
okay,
kind of same thing. Other brand. But very similarly, Smartmatic faced all of the same lawsuits that Dominion did and has been under the same fire under, one umbrella. They're two different brands that do the same thing, electronic voting machines, the same as Dominion. So how can this guy be, one, found guilty? I mean, obviously this conversation is bigger than just,
right.
Oh, yeah, it was clearly true. Like, it's not defamation if it's true and if it's factual. The conversation is really more about the fact that, like, this completely went outside of what your constitutional rights are when it comes to having a jury of your peers.
Correct.
So, much bigger conversation than just, it's a defamation issue. The fact that this is going on, and it's not the only time we've seen this type of thing go on. Another example of when we've seen this type of reaction from a judge, with no trial, no jury, was a lot of stuff during COVID. A lot of doctors, things like that, same thing. People were getting thrown in jail for spreading mistruths and lies, lying to their patients. No jury trial, nothing. Thrown in jail, stripped of everything. And, you want to talk about coming after your political opponents. Like, that's what this stuff is. It's lawfare.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And thank you for pointing out my error. It was one of the stories I glanced at earlier in the day, so I may have got things mixed up. So thanks for correcting that. But to your second point, this is absolutely the bigger point of the whole issue. Is this is further degradation of the system that was designed and built by our forefathers to make sure government could not mess with us. Now it is completely evolved into the opposite of what it was intended to do, where we have judges that are acting like kings, that are acting like judge, jury, and executioner. They can determine without there being a trial. How the hell does that work? I'm just going to sit at home and decide that you're guilty, and that's all the more that has to weigh in on it. This is a complete breakdown of the American system of justice, and this should be a concern to everybody. I don't know, no political leanings aside. This should be a grave concern to everybody that our courts can find somebody guilty, a judge can find somebody guilty with there being no trial, no jury. This is outrageous, and it should not stand. And they ought to remove that judge from the bench tomorrow if this is in fact what happened.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because think about what a slippery slope that is. You can get brought in on much, much sillier charges than this. And to think that you could be found guilty just because the judge doesn't really like you, maybe the judge doesn't like the way you look. Guilty. Nobody else is going to be able to step in if the judge has that kind of power. So what does that mean for any of us? What does that mean when some of these conversations that we're seeing around the world come to our country? Look at what's happening in the UK. In many parts of Europe, we're seeing police officers come to people's homes to question what they posted on their social media. This is a very normal thing lately. Just within the last, I think, week, a man in Canada was thrown in jail for denying the Holocaust.
That's correct.
These things could come here. And when there's no one, no jury of your peers to say, I don't know about that, and you're gonna get thrown in. It doesn't, whatever your opinion is, if it is in disagreement with the judge, it doesn't matter. Because this is, like you said, it's not a political thing. When you're on the wrong side of what that judge feels, it could happen to you.
Yeah. It completely displays a lack of understanding from the people and a lack of willingness to, it destroys the freedom of speech. We've already seen freedom of religion destroyed. We've already seen freedom of your right to petition and gather, as you know, petition your government. All of these rights that were guaranteed by the First and Other Amendment. Fourth Amendment is supposed to be secure in your homes. They're spying on us everywhere, listening to your phone, watching your emails, all of the things that were guaranteed by the Bill of Rights to be upheld by every single office holder, police officer, military person that ever put on a uniform and raised their hand and took that oath. That is their only job. And they have become the very people taking all of those things away. They're penning us in, folks. We're running out of escape avenues. At some point, this thing has got to spill over because we have lost everything the blood of our forefathers have won for us. Now, Bree, I have something completely off topic, completely out of the blue. I wondered if you have seen or heard anything. We had mentioned this person, and I think his name was Julian Brown. I could be wrong on that. This was a young man who supposedly had either developed or was developing a means of converting plastic back into a usable fuel, and I think it was called plastiline or gas, something like that. And then he felt threatened, and he was becoming very concerned for his health and well-being. And I have not been able to find a lot. I found stories about his findings, and then I found stories that tried to debunk his findings. And then I remembered hearing that he had felt threatened because of this development. I wondered if you had anything to add to that story.
No, I know that he had gone missing and then had turned up found, but I hadn't really seen anything after that. Did something pop up in your news cycle that made you think of him?
I was reviewing some notes from the past, just making sure that there was anything that we may have brought up. We had an opportunity to clean it up. And the last I knew, I didn't know he was found or where it was said that he was during the time that he was apparently missing, and I didn't know where that story ended up going. Just was curious.
Yeah, no. To my knowledge, he's been found, and he's still working on it. But I haven't thought of it and hadn't looked into it in a long time. So we might have to get some info on that and circle back to it in the coming episodes, because that is the type of innovation that keeps people free. And as discussed moments ago, people are working really hard for the opposite of that to happen.
They certainly are. Yep.
Actually, the last point that I personally had for the evening, I'm not sure if you have anything else. Last thing I wanted to bring up is a very fresh topic. The Oracle AI World Conference is going on right now. This was previously called Cloud World, and as of this year, they changed the name to AI World, annual global event. And we just talked about Larry Ellison last week when we were talking about people who donate large sums of money and have pretty involved partnerships with Israel. Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, is one of those people. And he did one of the keynote speeches at the event today. And I wanted to share just a couple quick blurbs from that speech. I did not listen to the whole thing, but I have a couple takeaways. It was right before we started recording, so this is kind of hot off the press info, but some of you might see this stuff in your radar. This is very much relevant to all the conversations that we've been having over the last couple weeks, especially pertaining to digital ID, AI control, Operation Lockstep, as many have come to call it. The one phrase that he used that stuck out to me was, "We will be living better lives and eating better foods." And he's referencing the use of AI in our day-to-day life when he talks about this. And the conversation is quite long, or the speech rather is quite long, but it's pretty disturbing, and it ties into a lot of these ideas that we discussed last week when we kind of reviewed Agenda 2030 and their 17 initiatives. And he is kind of touching on how the use of AI will be very helpful to bring all of these things to pass. He talks about how just something as simple as protecting your identity, with your digital identification and your biomarkers. These are all going to be very great, to protect you from fraud and things like that. Very simple, right? Perfect. He goes on to talk about, for quite a while, the implications that AI has in the medical world, from diagnostics. So, blood work, finding cancers, all those sorts of tests will be able to be shrunk down into much quicker diagnostic tests because it will all be run by AI. Then he goes on to talk about the use of AI in surgery and how, these surgeries, you'll never have to worry about a doctor slipping up because each one will be perfect. And I couldn't even really wrap my head around that because you can't even get a printer to work for more than 6 months. Correct. So that's a pretty bold claim to be like, yeah, it's, this is great. We're never going to have to worry about it again. If you've used a laptop or a phone ever, you know that it does not always work. This is absurd that we're even thinking that we have advanced technology to a point where we're just going to be running robots for your brain surgeries from now on. But he's convinced we're there, and he's convinced we're ready to roll these things out. Also talks about AI greenhouses. So he spent quite a bit of time talking about the production and management of food, which I thought, oh, ding, ding, ding. How much have we discussed this when we talk about this whole Big Brother surveillance state? This is a massive piece of that puzzle. And we were just talking about Agenda 2030 last week. Big piece of that puzzle. And it's tying in again here when you have these multi-billionaire. I mean, this is second wealthiest person on earth talking about how we're rolling these things out. We're going to get them going. We're going to have AI food development. There's going to be AI designed corn and wheat. So now not only are we focusing on production and management of food supply, but we're also going to be designing new strains. Now, we know how genetically modified organisms affect the human body. So what happens when we continue to install technology in the design of our food? How do we think this is going to go long term? This is my favorite one. He talks about AI drones. And it's all well and good. It's super great. It's going to be so helpful because these drones, they can do things like deliver medical supplies and detect forest fires. These are the examples he gives. That's laughable to me right off the bat. I'm like, so you're telling me that you're not going to be producing drones for the military?
Yeah.
You're just gonna, they're gonna be for the local Walgreens to deliver your medication once a month? Like, what is going on? This is how you sell this type of thing to the general public. Oh, it's gonna be great. Yeah, we're not gonna have to, pay any of these people anymore. So first things first, where do all the jobs go? Where do all these people go that suddenly have no jobs? If this is real, what have we created? Dependency on who? The government. Like, perfect storm. And this is not a new conversation. This is not something that we're talking about for the first time ever. But it's something that we've been talking about for a long time. It's something that other people have talked about for decades out of fear. And today we're hearing someone who is a co-founder of one of the companies capable of making these kinds of things reality saying, it's coming. It's coming to a city near you. Get excited. And I'm not excited. I'm seriously concerned. And all of these conversations that we've had tonight are very important, especially when we think about the fact that us all being up in arms against one another plays into this idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, you gave me a full quiver here of things to talk about. First of all, and you highlighted it, and rightfully so. This is the first step: is you sell it, and then you sell it. I hate to say it, a nation of sheep. Your discussion brought up several quotes, came to mind. A nation of sheep begets a government of wolves. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell you this is going to be wonderful. It's going to make your life easy. You won't have to get up off your dead ass on the couch. You can watch soap operas and football games forever and ever because the drone will be dropping off your supply. Meanwhile, it's surveying every absolute thing that's going on anywhere. We've got eyes on you, and nobody's too concerned about that. Another quote comes to mind: "He who would give up a little liberty for a little security will soon have neither." From Ben Franklin. So the other point that comes to mind as you discussed the Larry Ellison speech is we talked about in his delivery, selling, prepping the society for all the wonderful things that he's going to do for you. Hey, folks, if somebody is doing something wonderful for you, you're getting backdoored someplace. That's the way it works. But in his discussion, and I know you only gave a very little of it, but you talked about big food. You talked about big pharma, and you talked about the connection to the military-industrial complex. These are the people that are deciding for all of us how we're going to live. And it ain't going to stop until we decide to stop it. You get what you tolerate. We are sitting back, tolerating this oppression, tolerating this tyranny, and tolerating our wealth being stolen away and stuffed into the pockets of somebody like that because they claim to be an expert and they're going to do something wonderful for you. We have got to wake up. It's all being stolen away, and worse, as you said. Once you're dependent, the next step is bondage. You will be working, if you don't realize it, you already are, for the benefit of those that are not.
Yep. Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. I didn't get anything current on that. It must have been something really, really hot screaming to come in right before we got started here.
It was the speech was live probably an hour before we started. Ooh. So I was seeing things roll in off of live clips, and just I pulled as much as I could right before we got on because I wanted it to be enough of an example of what the conversation was about. So yeah, there's certainly more to it, and this is only one of the keynote speeches in this multi-day conference, so I'm sure there's a lot more that we could probably dissect, especially when we're talking about this threat of total control and the use of AI to see all of that through. So I'm sure there's a ton there. I also know there's a World Summit coming up in the first week of November, actually. So I figure we will try to touch that over the concepts that have been discussed over that. We'll review that and do an episode on what was discussed there. I know it's been a while since we kind of broke down an event like that. So I figured for our listeners, that will be one that we'll try to stay caught up on so that we can bring the highlights to you guys, because I think these conversations are particularly important now when we're seeing such drastic shifts around the world. So that's pretty much all I had for tonight. I don't know if there were any other stories you wanted to touch on before we close it out.
No, well, I wanted to again highlight and encourage everybody, and hopefully we can put the link up on the website, tie it to the show notes. The Stuart Rhodes conversation, able to be found on a New American Magazine. It was great. He really breaks down a lot of things that went on J6 and beyond after that, what happened to those guys, and many, and there's still a handful of them that are in limbo. So I would encourage everybody to get a broader view of that whole thing and take a listen to Stuart Rhodes. If you're traveling somewhere, put it on for an hour or whatever in the car. Secondarily, back a few weeks ago, we talked about remembering to encourage everybody. This is a war of good versus evil. We have been told how to prepare for this. We have been told to put on the helmet and the breastplate and all of those things and to seek truth. Seek truth. So we are encouraging everybody to humble yourselves and pray. That has also been instructed to us for the welfare of this country, to humble ourselves and pray, and perhaps the Father in heaven will hear from us and heal our land. And so with that, then my Bible verse for tonight, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness. And if you are delighting in something outside of the truth, this came from 2 Thessalonians. If you are promoting something outside of the truth, you are condemned.
Yep. Perfect. That's a great quote for the evening. A great quote for the last couple months, to be honest. So with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate if you, depending on where you're watching this, leave a review, give us a rating, subscribe, all those good things. Helps us out a lot, helps us to share this message as much as we're able. We will have a few guests to look forward to over the next several weeks. I think the next couple months we'll have a kind of mix of different guests. So we have that to look forward to. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing from just only the two of us, but I know that we always have fun having these conversations. So do look forward to a couple weeks of guests. And in the meantime, stay vigilant.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.